This video is partly inspired by fellow YouTuber Contrapoints, who is currently leading the world in a discussion reflecting on what's called cancel culture in the year 2020. I wonder if anyone will still use that term just 5 years from now. Maybe this will be forgotten if people look back and watch this video in the very near future. And it's also inspired by the fact that at the moment I have a really bad cold. This is now January 3rd. I've had a cold since December 17th, and it has massively impaired my mental as well as physical abilities. But I really resent the impairment of my mental abilities somewhat more. I think that Contrapoints and most of the other people discussing this have missed the most fundamental source of what we now call cancel culture, and that is the organization of education in the Western world. In the Western English-speaking world, almost all education is punitive in nature, and it's designed on the basis of a phony competition that's supposedly measuring your innate capabilities. So the teacher's job is to put all students at the same starting line, to impose the same finishing line, and then to judge them, to rank their abilities in order based on how they perform on the obstacle course along the way. Western education system is fundamentally not about learning. It's not about improvement. It's not about gaining the ability to do something regardless of how long it may take you. That it may take one person more time than another person to learn how to do algebra. But if the point were to actually produce competence in algebra, then you wouldn't design the education system. So it's like, hey guys, guess what? Everyone here has 2 months to learn how to do algebra to this standard. And then at the end of those 2 months, we're going to say, you get an A+, you get a B, you get a C, you get a D, and you fail. And that's the point of the education system. And why? Why do they do this? Because we have the illusion that what you're measuring is your innate, inborn talent for algebra. And do you know what you may be measuring? You may be measuring who had a cold during those 2 months. Just coming down with the common cold can mean that your academic performance is terrible for a crucial period of 30 days. And the way our system is set up, that can then impact your academic record for the rest of your life. And it can also result in you thinking, oh, I'm bad at math. Like I innately lack the talent to do math. Now, of course, there are a million other sources of bias and skew that creep into education. Like some people have parents who help them learn how to do math at home and some don't. Some people speak English as their first language and some don't. All these advantages and disadvantages, socioeconomic and otherwise, right? But what I'm questioning here is the format of education itself and the role of the teacher as being essentially punitive. So Contrapoints raise the interesting point that cancel culture is inimical to the process of people learning from their mistakes. Like somebody says something racist or somebody says something insensitive. Maybe someone says something that's really offensive about history, but they didn't realize how offensive it was. We had a politician in Canada who said some offensive things about the Holocaust, and she claimed she didn't know what the Holocaust was. She was that ignorant. She didn't even know what a concentration camp was and this kind of thing. The role of the teacher in the education system, again, is not to help people improve and reach their goal. It's to punish them for failing to reach the finish line as fast as other people who are in the same race, right? A contrast to this that is not too ideal or idealistic is to look at the way skills are gained in military education. So I'm going to describe what I mean here. Obviously, this isn't all education in the military, but it's a significant part of it. I once heard a man describing how in the Navy, they trained people to put out a fire on the deck of a ship. And it's not the case. They have a starting line for everyone and a finish line for everyone, and then they decide, okay, you're naturally talented at putting out fires and you're not. It's not the point. The point is not to grade people on how well they can put out a fire. The point is to train each and every one of those men to the point where they have mastery of that set of skills so that in a life and death situation, they will put out a fire on the deck of a ship as best as they possibly can and as best as any human being can. So you know what the first and most obvious difference is from education as we have it in our primary schools, high schools, universities in the Western world? There is no fixed finish line. You can keep doing the course for as long as it takes. So like there's a test where, they set up a phony fire. They have a drill, obviously, right? And you come in and you do that drill again and again and again until you basically get a grade of 100%. Like 80% isn't good enough, right? And if one person does that in 3 months, they happen to be talented, or maybe they have some prior education that really let them figure out. You can imagine you have to memorize the different types of hoses and fasteners. There's a certain level of book learning, but a lot of it's just manual skill. Maybe one person studies hard, works hard, and they completely master how to put out a fire in 3 months. So they finish that training module, great, they move on. But if someone else needs 6 months, if someone else needs 9 months, they're going to keep getting that repetition. They're going to go through that learning process again and again and again until completion. I grew up in downtown Toronto. We had immigrants from every part of the world in the school I went to. I didn't go to a rich people's school. At that time, we had a lot of immigrants from Chilean refugees. They weren't really immigrants, they were refugees. We had kids from Jamaica. We had a lot of kids at that time from actually Greece, okay? A couple Koreans. I don't remember a lot of Chinese, actually. I remember Koreans. All right? These kids, their parents didn't speak English at home. What is the point of teaching grade 6 English, primary school level English? Is the point just to evaluate, guess what? Big surprise, the kid who arrived here as a refugee from Chile can't write a book report at the same level of skill as the kid whose first language is English, who both of his parents speak English fluently, and maybe the parents help him with his homework. Wow, big surprise. This kid gets an A+, and this kid gets a D+ or a C-. And that kid had to work 10 times as hard for the same outcome. No. If fundamentally the point is to train all of these kids so they can get 100%, if the point is for them to actually have the skill, the ability to research and write a book report at a grade 6 level, then you will help those kids. You will work with those kids for as long as it takes. And quite likely, the kid who just arrived here from Chile, the kid who just arrived here from Korea, even the Greeks, the guys who arrived, their English was not that good, whatever. The new immigrants who arrived in the class, maybe they need to keep taking the course for an extra 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Maybe there needs to be flexibility to that finish line, right? But the role of the teacher in being punitive, in saying, no, you pass, you fail, you're good, you're bad, you're talented, and you're not. It's fundamentally counterproductive bullshit. And these people who are typically on the left wing, we're going to come back to this, they're not all left wing. These people who are stereotypically on the left wing, playing the game of counterculture, what the position they think they're in is the role of the schoolmaster, is the role of the school teacher, grading and evaluating others, punitively assessing the performance of others, not helping them, not educating them. All right? Now, it's hard. The role of a teacher, it's hard. It's got to come from a certain sort of place of love and sympathy and concern, where you actually say to a kid, and the kid may not have good intentions. The kid may be lazy. Say to this kid, look, I know you're not really motivated to write the best book report you can, but I got to work with you. I got to help you. You got to work with me. Let's take as much time as this needs. Let's actually develop this so you have this competence. And then if you want to later, you can go on to university or whatever it is you do with this competence. But where it's actually about the learning outcome. Okay? Now, politically, I mean, when I deal with left-wing people, a lot of the time, they have real misconceptions about economics. The most popular misconception I encounter on the left wing, and I'm far to the left myself, are left-wingers who believe that money is infinite. Left-wingers who dogmatically believe there is no such thing as a debt problem, there's no such thing as a debt crisis, that it's just impossible for the government to spend too much money and go bankrupt. Okay? Now, I don't cancel those people. I don't sit back and say, okay, well, I'm going to judge you like you have some innate lack of talent for economics. All right? The reality is what I have to try to do is help those people. And, yes, I try to use Socratic method. I try to use real-world examples. Have you heard of this, that, and the other historical example where countries really do go bankrupt, where, life for everyone becomes miserable because the public sector, the government mismanaged its debt, spent too much money, and then things collapse. And it's hard. It's got to come from a place of love and sympathy, and you got to ask the other person to sympathize with you, and they may not recognize you as a teacher. They may not recognize you as having good intentions. They may not want to recognize that you know something they don't know. But, where does this stuff come from? Ultimately, it may just be that they were born in circumstances with their own parents that they grew up ignorant, or even with a kind of self-righteous ignorance on this topic, right? And ultimately, it may be just as arbitrary as when you happen to have a cold, when you happened to come down with the flu, and you missed that month's lessons in economics class, and you never caught up. We all struggle with these intellectual inequalities that are arbitrary. We're all burdened with it. And our system of education trains us to regard those inequalities as innate and to judge one another as if these were ethical characteristics, part and parcel of who we are as human beings that we can never change. All right? The fact that your parents were racist doesn't mean you have to be racist. The fact that you grew up racist doesn't mean you have to be racist. And, a more nuanced example, maybe the fact that your parents raised you with lies about American Indians, Native people, First Nations, the Iroquois, the Ojibwe, the Mohawk. Most white people grew up with lies about that, not really knowing the history of where America comes from, European colonization and genocide. Most of us grew up with lies, whether your parents, grandparents, or school teacher told you, okay? The fact that you have false information inculcated into you, and you may have a bad attitude towards that information, and you may not want to learn, and you may not have the curiosity to challenge it yourself, okay? The good news is there is no finish line but death. As long as you're alive, you can reach out to others and you can learn. And others, if they know what it truly means to be a teacher, they can reach out and they can teach you.